Всем привет, это проект Alpha.
Hello everybody, this is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolai Feldman. This is War Diary with Alexey Arestovich. I was streaming live. Alexey has joined us. Good evening, everybody. All right, let's start. Let's start with NATO. Ukraine is as close as never to joining NATO. Different politicians and allies are saying to the media. What do you say, Alexey? Is it true or not? No, this is not true. This is the exact case of creating a pseudo-reality now by dear allies, trying to create a vision that, of course, Ukraine will prevail, but we will not let you shoot up Russian airfields. And, of course, you will join NATO, you will be super NATO, over NATO. But when you ask them about the invitation to NATO, you get a lengthier answer. Or how they're trying to say, it's time to define for Ukraine what does the victory mean for you. And they start digging and deviating over there. So they're creating this fake reality. First, they're giving a fake hope for Ukraine. Second, to report to their own citizens where did they spend $400 billion over 2 years. Right? It'll be a future NATO member. We're fortifying it. And ourselves, and also to scare Russian Federation if they do not want to agree to certain terms, to make sure that negotiating positions get closer and closer on both sides. So, Alexey, this seems like it's another white elephant that is big in the room, but it will be easily discarded later. Right, don't think about white monkey, and if anything happens, we'll always denounce that it ever was present. So it's just raising the negotiation threshold. There are some people who still believe that. And there are also people who don't only believe, but also make a lot of propaganda based on this. And you can make your own conclusions why they're creating this pseudo-reality. If they really believe it, then they're idiots. If they do not believe it, then they're scoundrels. You choose. All right, so let's say, Alexey, that about a year ago you said that maybe the negotiation position now on the table is probably joining NATO without the occupied territories. And then later you did say that this position would not be on the table for too long, and if you will not agree to that, that position will not be on the table again. So that offer, so-called Western Germany version of NATO, it was on the table for a while, right? Then it was removed, and now it is there as the white elephant. Is that the logic? Do I understand everything correct? Nikolai, it has not left the table really, ever. Remember when we discussed the topic of a Korean option about a year and a half ago? That's when everybody believed that after Kharkov and Kherson operation and their successes that will deoccupy the rest and will take Vladivostok very soon. And our position looked very strange to many. Today, they're talking about it very seriously because it's another stage of negotiations that have never stopped. And the West is very consistent in working. Usually they post a lot of things in the peripheral media. Sometimes it's a statement from the ex-leaders of different countries or different ministers. The only exception is Peter Pavel, probably from Czech Republic, who is with the directness of a military, is putting it as he sees that, as the head of the military committee of NATO. So, through them. And only later officials are making their statements, but they will never put it up front. The West had solved this matter about 100 years ago. There was a big discussion when they were discussing whether democracy is creating a pseudo-reality for people so that make it easier to vote for them, or if you have to explain in details the reality to them. And of course that conversation is still present, but on the level of practice, practicality, it's the creation of that pseudo-reality. My task, as I see it, is to destroy the pseudo-reality. These streams are to destroy that pseudo-reality. We're trying to show you here, this is the reality they want you to believe, that is in the media, and this is what really is happening. All right, Alexey, so that question is also related to expedited joining European Union and also the peace summit that is now being announced that it will not happen in November. What is really happening? What do we know? What do we know about the joint negotiating position? And when can it actually affirm itself? And summit in November is also part of that negotiating position. Let me be very delicate here, not to hurt things. So in life, there are situations when people paint their wants, their fantastic wants around something. Around these wants, there's usually a pseudo-reality that is very cheerful, that is very tasty, that is very likable. And then later people figure out that reality is different from all these pictures. Then there is a need to look at it from a different angle. And people try to do something with that reality to see that maybe there is some chance for this to still happen. And one can probably deduce that the organizers, and this is just a theory, of the summit, that nobody is really going to come to the summit. The desire to come there is not too strong, and that real decisions are being made elsewhere. This is the well-known problem of Israel, where 5 big players are sitting at the table and drawing the new view of the world, new state of the world, but they're not letting neither Israel nor Ukraine to that table because we're both dependent on 2 or 3 different players from Europe, from Britain, from United States. And therefore our task, and our joint task with Israel in this case, is to announce our interests in that narrow corridor that we have, and for the country that is dependent up to 80% from these 3 major players, the corridor is maybe for remaining 20%. And second, if we want to be heard, or if we want to participate at the table of negotiations, we need to be breaking dishes very loudly. This is what exactly we're doing, both us and Israel. Problem is that when they listen to us, when they finally pay attention to us and say, okay, you broke the dishes, you spat on the bodyguards and security, you drew attention to your persons. And it's not that Netanyahu and Zelensky are defective teenagers, but the collective positions of both countries is in a difficult place. And when we get those so-called billionaire club to listen to us, we do not really have anything interesting, anything material to present them. I don't know if any of our viewers actually had time to read these materials, but they're putting it delicately, saying that the peace plan coming from Ukraine is too washed out. It needs more concretization. It needs to be more concrete and more defined. It is very ill-defined. And here, if you look at the document that needs to become the core of the event, and it's too nebulous, what will happen to the event? Right, puff. Event will probably be removed and moved further out until the document is stabilized. And it also implies another not a good thing, that the real destinies of this conflict are being solved not on this event, but somewhere else. There are also questions, Alexey, about the Switzerland, Brazil, French and others initiative, and China, right? Who's the driver? China is the driver. All right, so if China is the driver, Alexey, why China is not gathering this summit, or they don't need to? Oh, China has different instruments. They don't need a summit. They created a group of friends of peace. These are usually countries of so-called Global South, South America, Africa, and Asia, but they also involved Switzerland as an investor, France as an observer, and this is the group of countries who want to affirm that multipolar world is reality, and second, that they want to make money on this world, including the after-war development and rebuilding and reconstruction. And they're, of course, interested in geopolitically multipolar world. And part of them also want to be investors and want to profit from processes there. For example, from rebuilding of Ukraine or participating in the Ukraine economy, which seemed to be a monopoly of the West, and Chinese did not seem to be present in this frame, but they're very interested. But there's a problem that the West may be against Chinese investments. And the question is, do we have enough will, enough levers to agree with the West that we would be able to ingest investments from different vectors? And the question also with the West, how much would they agree to that? In what parameters? In what form? And who owns the village of Krukova? That's the least of concerns on this table of negotiations. Well, look, Alexey, I'm usually a media person, right? And I'm asking questions that I see floating in the media that are of interest to myself personally. And I'm trying to be close to reality, but I want to make a statement here. I do not understand a damn thing what is happening now. Who is doing what and where the heck are we moving to? Where is the assemblage point of all that? Caravan. When we talked about a summit in Switzerland, it was clear that Ukraine is conducting a summit in Switzerland. It goes and visits Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, India, other countries to engage and to participate and negotiates with everybody about the position of Ukraine. And then at the end of the summit, Zelensky came out and said that it is not in our interest to prolong that. There'll be a couple months and we'll conduct another one. There was more than 2 months already. By November, it'll already be 4 months. And it doesn't look like this summit is happening. And we still don't know where the summit will be, who will come visit it. All right, Chinese-Brazil initiative may be taken as the basis. Switzerland and France may join it. But are we even doing it or not? It seems to me, I will not insist on that, but I suspect that everything will be solved without any summit. And all the motions in existence, they point towards that, including the moving of the dates of summit. However upsetting it is for Ukraine, but that's what it is. Well, right, this is a position, I understand that. I can understand this, thank you. And there are a lot of signals indicating that. First of all, that existence of Chinese-Brazil initiative. If summit was an effective instrument, then why Chinese would be developing their own? They would participate summit and use it as the platform for enhancing their opportunities. All right, I can take that as a position, Alexey. Nikolai, very simple. The boys are playing in the backyard. And one is saying, let's go play there, let's go play in that construction zone, or let's go play in that other abandoned house. Right? The fact is, whenever you hear the second suggestion, the second offer, it implies that the previous offer was not acceptable, was not of interest for everybody present. That means that, no, not satisfied, let's look for something else. All right, got it. I can allow that Brazil, China, and France initiative can be taken as the basis. Ukraine may agree with that and say, okay, we're ready to a ceasefire. No, Nikolai. The West has their own initiative, not Chinese and Brazil initiative. And now we need to somehow find some medium between them. That's the problem between different initiatives, that you need to somehow find a path where different plans do not go counter other plans. And right now we have 5 different peace initiatives. And the biggest, the gargantuan task is somehow merge them into one. The funniest thing is that they most likely are getting together via the framework of Istanbul agreements. The framework that was built then goes down and matches most of these initiatives just fine. But therefore we do have now a struggle of different initiatives that will end up in some initiative, but first everybody understands that elections in the United States need to happen. And until it's clear, until who is a new president is announced in the United States, until you can get approval of the next master of the White House, you do not know where the vector is going. Is it globalist or is it national populist? So if the elections are happening early November, generally by the end of November, this event could be happening. But again, there are several other reasons affecting it, so likely it is a bit nebulous and it may be pushed out further. And there are several other players who would say that, well, we will not acknowledge these elections if the other side wins, right? So United States is not a simple one. Oh, the space for solutions is expanding, right? The space for different variations is expanding. It's definitely not getting narrower. Nikolai, that's actually better, I think, because that enables more situations where the space for different solutions is expanding. There are more potentialities then. All right, I have another question, rather formal, about the plan of peace summits and the like. Let's allow the West will consolidate its position and will somehow merge its initiative with Brazil and China and France, and Ukraine will agree with that. What if Russia will not agree with that? What will happen then? Who will be responsible for what? Have you seen Kung Fu Panda, Nikolai? Well, Russia is that brown bear, and China is the big, huge panda that rolls this brown bear with one left hand. If Russia will disagree with Chinese initiative, there'll be several interesting trials and tribulations for Russia to go through. Like what? Different. For example, no calculations in yuan, right? Or the system of BRICS makes their own SWIFT payment system, and that is not applicable to Russia anymore. When you suddenly discover that the main trade partner of yours is dwindling the volume and nomenclature of trade, you may have certain crisis elements in your economy, which eventually will spill over into crisis events in the social life and then result in crisis situations in politics. And it's difficult to conduct a victorious warfare during the times of these tribulations. Now, this is just one of the instruments, the economic one. And there could be also ideological tool used, where one can say that, we disagree about the use of armed forces in the international politics. We are against it. And start voting for the resolutions against Russian armed forces. And don't forget that China is the member of the United Nations Council with the veto right. And there are a lot of channels how to attack Russia over there. There'll be different angles how they can affect it. Or they can start taking over Russian partnerships in Africa, not participating jointly, but will start conducting aggressive politics of taking over Russian presence in other countries, in the countries of BRICS and organizations of Central Asia. So lithium ore mine could become Chinese, right? Became Russian for now, but it can always go back to China at some point under certain circumstances. So China has different angles to affect the situation. All right, I understand that framework. Don't think we need to expand on that further. I think it's bright enough or visible enough. I think we closed everything in relation to Peace Summit and everything relating to NATO. The only thing is probably EU. I mentioned it, but I don't think you followed. Joining EU, is that still an option for Ukraine? Is it part of that negotiation? There is another sore point here, Nikolai. Right now, Ukrainian delegation is conducting negotiations with European bureaucrats about speeding up that event. And so what European taxi drivers are telling me, they're saying that negotiations got to a very interesting point, and it will resonate with our Ukrainian listeners. European Union implies free movement of goods and people through the borders of EU, and even in times of war, countries cannot limit that right. If EU wants to preserve its core, they never limit these things. So Ukrainian delegation comes in and says, could you make an exclusion for us? Because 30 countries of yours can move around and move their goods around as they like, and we have a closed border, so please take us as we are. No, we cannot make an exclusion for you, answer the bureaucrats. That's not how it works. You have to open borders even during war times if you want to join. This war, any other next war, whatever happens. Our country says, no, no, no. Even after war, we don't want to open the borders. We want to make an exception because everybody will leave the country then, all the people who can be drafted. We, for a while, will have to keep our borders closed even after this war. Then EU hold their heads and they say, no, this may not happen. This is against the core of EU. Maybe you're looking for a different organization. Then our emissaries are saying, no, no, we want to join you, but we need that exception. This is how negotiations about joining the EU are going, so that you understand and all the viewers understand. Again, taxi drivers say so. Would you think they could be lying? They could be, but okay. So with closed borders, imagine that EU broke their head and somehow stepped over itself and found a way to adopt Ukraine with closed borders on the expedited procedure. When can that happen, if that happens? Never. Nikolai. Seriously? Well, the fact is, there are 36 volumes of regulations of EU, from the size of your electric outlets to space flights to everything. And we haven't even opened the first volume. We're just going through the introduction. And if we'll be reviewing our economy at least one folio a year, and this takes a lot, this is 36 years, right? This is not in our reality to join EU. Maybe in some other reality, perhaps, if something happens in Russia, etc. But in the current situation, I cannot see us joining EU in the next 10 to 15 years, which means pretty much no when, because this is a huge chunk of time in regards to international politics. At the minimum, we need to change our structure of economy. This is different from economy. There is not a single country that is just a producer of ore and raw materials. So it seems to me, Alexey, that from all the signals that I'm getting, that this is a question that should be discussed or solved next year right after the ceasefire. No, Nikolai, that's exactly the artificial environment that I was talking about, that is created for a certain reason, and it exists in every country for usually the same reason, that elites would preserve the status quo. The building is wobbling, but the elites are still on top, and everything is still going as they like. And that's what I'm trying to do here, to dispel on this show, this reality, and show what the actual life is, what the actual situation is. I do not have any other, frankly, motive to conduct these streams. This is lies, this is truth, and this is the difference, and this is why the lies are there. We've been dispelling the lies time and time again, but looking at this again, forget about EU and NATO. This is generally the trading chip on the table between the 5 big players, but they're discussing it from the angle that Ukraine needs to become a part of the West, but will not be formally integrated into NATO or EU, because it creates a big imbalance on the border of big political tectonic plates. And all countries are interested in that. And of course, they will elevate the price for that, and they'll be using it, saying, look, we agreed for Ukraine not to join EU or NATO, to push Russia and China to agree to some other things. But in reality, it's not on the table for us to join. I don't even talk about our agriculture that is not a match to EU. It's difficult to fit it into the EU. The structure of our economy is difficult to fit into the EU framework. But if somebody wants to believe, we cannot deny their holy right to believe in whatever they want to believe in. All right, good. Understood. Thank you for explaining these important and complex questions, because some people were hoping that maybe they're on the verge of resolution. Another piece of news, in South Korea, they made a statement that North Korea most likely will send their army to support Russian Federation in the war with Ukraine. What does it mean, do you think? It's a wrong translation, Nikolai. They meant groups of soldiers and officers, certain specialists, to support Russia. And the fact that different consultants, different groups have been present on the Russian front, that's not a secret. Even Iranian specialists at one point got hit. So this is not a surprise. The presence of North Korean army in this war would create an imbalance on the global table of these 5 global players, and it will skew the table to one side. And one of their agreements is that players should control their satellites to not make drastic changes that change the flow of negotiations on this table. One of the bigger things was already adopted by the EU and United States and England and Britain, that the world is multipolar. So de facto, some of these five have already pushed the other group to agree that the world is multipolar again. But their task is to still hold the armed conflict, the first time since 1945 on such a scale, is de facto accepted by big players as a tool of global politics in gray zones, etc. Before that, it was present, but it was denounced, it was not official. Now this is actually allowed. This is the result of this war, but not on the global level. So for the world war to happen, you need two big coalitions who have different understandings of the worldview, and they clash. Today we have these two sides with different views, but they don't want to clash. And moving Korean brigades and divisions and corps, this is a global violation. This basically turning the Far East and moving it right to the border of Europe. And this will change the negotiation map terrain significantly. That will be looked at as the actions against the logic of the global peace effort. And it will be taken very negatively by all players if Chinese would decide to do that. And Koreans would not go for this without China, you understand. Of course, there could be some specialists, there could be some people who know how to use the Korean missiles or Korean ammunitions. That's okay. Russia cannot be just taking shells and armor and munitions and other supplies from North Korea. They need to give something back, and of course they need to open some of participations, some of the front for Korean specialists to participate and to observe and to learn from the use. If there would be a battalion, even if it's some neutral sappers battalion or a hospital from North Korea, this will be countered with Czech battalion, British battalion, Polish battalion. This will be a global escalation. And then China that comes out with peace, let's strike peace, and here's our peace plan. Do you think China will go for this? Because China will be asked for, not Korea. China will be asked for that. What the heck is it? Maybe you'll send a Korean battalion to Britain or to Alabama in the United States? To Dakota, right. Okay, got it. Let's go look at military political inner affairs. We have an interesting information here that General Krivonos was sharing that General Zaluzhny, the Commander-in-Chief Zaluzhny back then, was actually wounded in May of last year after the call from the office of the president as the result of an attack on the command outpost in Zaporizhia district. I'm sure you probably have seen this story, you have read about it or read it. Tell us more, what do you know about it? I do not know, Nikolai. I can ask Valery Fedorovich if it is so, but I don't want to, because this is peddling in hearsay, and our stream is not about hearsay. This one is, the story is presented as hearsay from the beginning. This is presented as a hearsay of a conspiracy taste, and is a part of creating a pseudo-reality where there are traitors in the office. I do not like office. I know them personally. I know how they treat me and other people. I know a lot of mistakes and scoundrel stuff that they do, but I don't want to create pseudo-reality and prop up that conspirology up. So let's imagine, okay, perhaps he was wounded. Personally, I don't want to ask him about it, but imagine it is so. What does it imply? That after the call from the office, somebody called from the office, verified, where are you, Valery Fedorovich? Or using some technical tools, they discovered his location, and in 20 minutes they transferred this information to Russians, and they had something on the front line that was on duty that hit that outpost and hit it well from the first attempt. I want to tell you that from getting the data to getting to the point of when Iskander missile can launch is usually 2.5 hours. This is if this complex is on duty. If you think that Intel is so smooth and working that you can in 20 minutes give the data and shoot it up, you're very disconnected from reality. If this is how the artillery and missiles would be working, everybody would be sitting dead, right? Everybody would be dead already. So even if they somehow figured out the location in 20 minutes to hit it up, it's a very hefty proposition. Could be a coincidence if they actually hit this place. But then you have to exclude this call from the office, because this goes to the land of conspirology fuckery. And again, if somebody even intercepted the call and figured out where Zaluzhny is, but again, to strike this outpost in 20 minutes, let me not believe. So these two birds, Krivonosov and Bereza, are sitting on the tree and creating different stories about Zaluzhny and the office of the president, and people are reading it and thinking, oh my god, we got horrible traitors in the office, and Russians are too effective. I want to remind that when Russia was hunting General Dudayev in Chechnya, there was an operative combination. It was actually a third or a fourth attempt at his life. They started to talk to him on the cell phone, and then they launched a missile from a jet in the air that was targeting the GPS coordinates of that area. That was not targeting even the phone, it was targeting the material supply units being present in the area with him. And the call was necessary not to target him by the phone, but to bring him out in the open where he can be hit by a missile. And they already had jets in the air. Could that have been with Zaluzhny? Could have been. They could have been hunting him. They could have had certain fire measures ready on duty. But after the call doesn't imply because of the call, right? So this is a very low-grade conspirology, fairy tales, another pseudo-reality being concocted from the camp of Poroshenko people. Let's not go there. All right. I understand your position on this. Good. Then let's go to all questions about Vuhledar, 123rd Territorial Defense, and suicide of Lieutenant Colonel Grib, who was the commander of one of the battalions of 123rd Territorial Defense Group. There are different versions of why it happened. First, that people were accused of leaving their positions. And I'll quote most official source we have from the government, it's government media, Suspilne, that said that the warriors of 123rd Brigade left their positions in Voznesensk, about 100 fighters of that battalion. They were protesting the level of supplies, the level of training. All of them refused to participate in fighting, and they left at their own volition their positions of their detachment. Commander of a platoon shared that information with the journalist, and he also highlighted that he was requesting ammo, he was requesting machine guns, nothing was given, so logistics sucks. And after that, the battalion commander of that unit actually committed suicide, about which we read from the post by journalist Boyko. What do you know about the situation? What needs to be said about it? First, Nikolai, what Suspilne is presenting and what Boyko is publishing is one of the interpretations. The question to our society, can we operate with interpretations? As a society, we probably could, but probably we shouldn't. As for the government, what do we need to operate with? The facts, right? So, if there is a resonant event, overlapping resonant events, the loss of a township that was successfully defended for 2 years before that, second brigade that was defending it successfully had withdrawn, and society still is not aware whether they have withdrawn on their own or whether there was an order. And third, the battalion that was supposed to come in and replace them that never arrived, which actually may be a military crime. Depends upon the qualification. And generally, it is usually a military offense that needs to be investigated, and judicial system needs to look into that. So this is a resonant case, and it should have been announced by judicial system. The government should have said that here is the first resonant factor. This is what's happening. These are questions we need to find answers for. There is an active case being investigated, and these are things we are trying to find answers for. For now, we have taken these measures. There is a commission that is digging into this, and as soon as we know, we'll publish this. This needs to be communicated. There has to be figured out an objective version, because otherwise, in lack of it, society will be breeding all these conspiracy theories and other versions of events. And army is, by the way, a branch of the government, right? Both brigades, 123rd and 72nd, they're government institutions. So government is responsible for them. And one group belonging to territorial defense, which, by the way, had their day recently, so our congratulations to them. And the other one belongs to infantry, to the army. So they're all parts of the Ministry of Defense, of government structures, and they needed to communicate all that through the process. But they remain mum. They leave it to journalists and to rumors and to bloggers, and they allow for the worst thing to happen, to fester, to breed all these conspiracy theories around the topic for our independence, war for our independence. It's probably a key element over the last 100 years of our history, if not a key element for the next 100 years as well. And instead of following that tightly, government allows for all these rumors to be bred. Why is it possible? Because everybody are so used to managing through that pseudo-reality, then actually looking at the reality, everybody is okay with the pseudo-reality. First of all, it's a habit. Second, it's part of politics. And third is nobody is interested in digging into the actual data. We can try to dig a little bit into this. 72nd Brigade don't know whether they had an order or did not have an order. They left. 123rd refused to enter. They're saying there maybe was an order. So that's what needs to be discovered. What were the conditions? What were the terms for the 72nd to leave their positions? And second is why 123rd refused to enter and take those positions. And after discovering details, certain measures need to be taken against those who were in charge of these events. And then the next question would be, who was the manager, who was the director of all this, who was giving an order for these brigades to rotate, and what supply reserves were present, were given to these detachments. And I'll name several of these conditions. We have an army that is being managed not by battle orders, but by battle notes. And they are different. You're not legally responsible for the note, you're legally responsible for the order. That's why our military since 2014 is avoiding as much as they can anything to be ordered. They're only sending the writs and the notes. And battle writ sounds like this. You are told to go to that area and do something, and there is no legal responsibility for that. One would have to dig deeper, and if you have a good attorney, he will fight for your position, because you can basically state that you came to the position and you did as much as you could and couldn't fulfill the suggested command in that writ because this and this happened, because it was not an order. If it was an order, you immediately would be judicially responsible, legally responsible for violation. But the battle order has a very uncanny feature. It becomes legally binding not only for the subordinates, but also for the person giving this order, because he is also liable for providing for the troops you're sending to battle. Logistics. How did you make a decision? How was the order given? Was it given according to procedure? Was all the work concluded and done properly? Did you provide enough ammo? Did you provide enough training? And then one would discover that nothing was done, and it's just one left and the others didn't come in. That's it. That's why they like battle writs and notes. They don't like battle orders. Because in the order, there is a word, order. The first thing you learn at the military academy is that after you figure out where is north, south, weather, and enemy, the close next thing is when we're just, first year students, we already then, the first field exercise, even before you take an oath, the moment you say that I order, you're fully responsible for what you're ordering. So there is a military judicial system standing behind your back, looking at your actions with detail. But that service of military justice was destroyed in 2019. New generation came to power and destroyed military justice system. So now you cannot normally investigate military. And then the whole army is running with notes and writs instead of orders. See, one nail is missing, the kingdom is lost. And we have a million of nails like that in Ukraine. Because if everybody was ordered, right, we have different groups of military fighting with deserters, with wrongful orders and wrongful behavior of commanders. All you need to do is bring it back to the code to make sure that the decisions are formalized in the right fashion, that after each decision there has to be the word I order, because military are managed by orders, which a lot of people do not understand, because the last couple dozen years actually had a very negative effect on military. We are even questioning now the unity of command in military, which is the core principle of military. And it implies that every unit has only one commander who is fully responsible for all the orders. Army is the organization where things are ordered, not where they're advised, not where they're counseled, but where they're ordered. And the one who's ordering will also be asked for if he is making an order, giving an order. And right now, our tactical commands communicate with brigades roughly in such a fashion, without going into details. Brigade comes in and says, well, we lost the position of a platoon on that coordinates. And they just write back saying, we prescribe you to take this position back. And what is that prescription? We prescribe you to take all measures. You need to do that. What is a battle order? When we order you, we take all responsibility for the consequences of attempts to do that and for material supply of your unit in order to be able to carry out this order. Because many people don't know. They, how it happens on the front. Some platoon commanders can say, here, I don't have a communication. They throw out the battery and their communication is not working. I lost my battery. Platoon is not going anywhere. And they're not going anywhere because this is a prescription. And again, orders are tricky. They can work with the government in such a fashion that if you follow the code, you can say also, you need to provide me with a new radio. The old one is not working. So the subordinates have different ways of affecting the people giving the orders. I am missing the shoelace, right? You need to provide the shoelace. And I'll be sitting there waiting till the shoelace is being brought. And I'll be fully in the right if you really follow the code. So those who are still in commanding position, generals and the like, they do know that detail, and they know that they cannot really give the real order on the current circumstances, because the whole system will make sure he is responsible and he will fail to be able to provide enough logistics, enough material resources for carrying out the order. So they together jointly devised a way to go around the orders and to not use orders. For example, somebody is missing an insignia on his shoulder. It's hard to identify me on the battlefield. I need that piece restored, or my battery is out. There's a ton of different ways to circumnavigate. You're talking about counter-revolutionary things here, Alexey Nikolaevich, because the system was supposed to be working to the code, Nikolai. And when the general, lieutenant, or sergeant are writing, I order to take that position, there is 1,000 different questions. What was the planning like? What was the materials? What was the communication like? Aerial intel? How did you organize that? And only after that, the soldier needs to go and execute that. And you're doing that as a commander before you give an order to a soldier. And if I'm the elder in that system, I carry full responsibility. Even if I'm the commander of a platoon, I bear full responsibility for everybody in my platoon. That's how it works. And if this is amiss, it's not working. And the second thing people are taught after the word I order, categorically forbidden to give orders that are impossible to implement, that cause questions about implementation, because this is a direct way to unraveling the whole system and to causing confusion with your subordinates. And now a question, how do you make a task realistic or not realistic? How much did you provide in order for this order to be fulfilled? Two things. After that, the system will work and you don't waste resources storming some groves, because every commander will be thinking, am I giving the right order? Will I go to jail for that order? Because for battle writs, I can wipe my butt with that. I can waste hundreds of people on these battle prescriptions in stupid grove attacks, and nothing will follow. And when all that commission comes and removes brigade commanders, any advocate, even civilian attorney, can fight for his position, for his future. It's easy. It's a prescription. There is no judicial responsibility for a prescription if it's not an order. And only because army is at the level of stupidity they are right now, and the way things are demotivated and not working there, with up to 100,000 voluntary leaving of your service places, of your detachments. This is horrible. This is why it's not working. And this tomfoolery exists only because they refused to use the code and the core documents that should be forming and creating the responsibility within military. And that's where we are losing tens of thousands of people without others carrying any responsibility of why that happened. These are the questions that we need to post about Vuhledar, and not who refused to do what. The army is managed wrongfully. They're not managed by a code. And the fact of its mismanagement disrupts the whole system of military, of army in the Ukraine. They become volunteer corps, sometimes they may even prevail and win, but this is not an army, and it will lose at the end, and will be eating the consequences of this loss when Chinese or Brazilian or whatever other plan is being implemented, when we'll have millions of people coming back to society with the taste of a lost war. And that's when we'll eat shit as a society. All those who were supporting that, all those who were not fixing it, and journalists are trying to go deeper into the consequences. No, dig deeper into the reasons why, into why it happened, why they're blaming the dead, right? The usual thing. This is just a small nail in a big non-working system. When I made an order and said, go there, I order you to take this position, and my subordinates went there and had blown up along the way, the questions will be asked, why did not you provide engineering? Why the minesweepers did not check? But when you operate with notes and writs, you can say, well, the drone dropped something, we did not know. If it is an order, there'll be more questions asked. Was the radio electronic interference set on this vehicle? What was the frequency? When was it used? Is it functional? Were the soldiers trained to use it? Were they trained to move right in concealment? Was enough concealment used? Where was defense of that unit? Where were the neighboring units? You as a commander who made a decision, come here and be responsible for all that, how the decision was made, and how did you get to that point? And this is why the commander would have a lot of thoughts and needs a lot of training in order to move your platoon by 20 yards to a different side. You saw how the training was done in People's Reservist, that the army is an orchestra. You need to know how to manage the orchestra, how to conduct an orchestra. You need to be able to transfer the signal correctly to your neighbor, correctly, without things being changed. And here we have the core of battle command being disrupted. And when this nail is removed, nothing will work. Even if everybody is super brave, everybody is super NATO with all the long-range missiles, nothing will work in the military. In our military, we have a very faulty element present, since 2014 at least. We need to restore the code. We need to restore adherence to the orders and restore the system of military justice that can evaluate the work of military, because you need to have professional military to understand the conditions in which the officer is making his decision. And all these Vuhledars and Bakhmuts, these are the consequences of that nail. That's it. All right, thank you, Alexey. This was a very elucidating monologue, but I want to finish this topic. There is also support to your words in this regard. There is RBC Ukraine publishing saying that, verbatim, according to Hortitsa, after suffering big losses, the enemy still did not stop their attempts to capture Vuhledar and attempt to take the township at any cost. They sent additional detachments to create attacks on the flanks at the Ukrainian troops in the city. And in order to preserve lives, the command of Ukrainian army gave an allowance to leave Vuhledar and to create maneuver, to withdraw from Vuhledar, to preserve personnel and military equipment, to take further positions. So here we have a fact. Yes, they were given a permission. Right, this is not an order. Right, that's it, Nikolai. This is an official message. Exactly. What allowance? What permission are we talking? There are no permissions in the army. Permission in the army is the only one to stand loose, and it's only, even that is given with a command, at ease. You're either given an order to hold the position or to go to a new position. There are only 6 things that troops can do. They cannot do anything else. Defense, offense on the, or counter-offense, and then stabilizational actions. And there is nothing else the soldier can do. And they can also deploy at the location. Right? And there are sub-elements of leaving the encirclements, etc. But the orders are given in regards to these 6 actions. Training is training following one of these 6 steps, 6 major elements. It's either a march, it's either a deployment and location, but the soldier is always training on these 6 different kinds of action. You can only get allowance to maybe drink water, get a permission to drink water or to have a smoke, and even that is given as a verbal order. For example, roll up your sleeves, or everybody unbutton the top button, put your head garment on, break to drink of water. So everybody is following that, and whoever is giving this order is responsible for his subordinates doing that or not doing it. Everybody crying, everybody smiling, everybody singing the anthem, everybody whistling, right? What is a permission? I give a permission to fight or to leave? No, it should be a battle order to leave and take new positions. Or the order is to prevent the enemies from breaking through the line and prevent their diversion groups to enter to a certain area. Here is the outline of your territory. Here is what you get as a support, starting from fuel to your vehicles, and then munitions, radio, communications, intel, and everything else. If I'm able to provide all that, then I give an order and saying by that hour, at that time, this is the signal for that operation, this is a doubling signal, change the frequency for that, and at that time you start moving and following the order. Commander may have a little bit of space to maneuver within the order because they can see more on the ground, but overall this is an order. This is not some messaging saying that yes, we allow you to, and then the commander who is deemed to be responsible for all the loss, he suicides himself. And then if the order failed and some soldiers died, that's when the investigation starts. That's when the military justice representatives dwell on you and start investigating and asking questions. Why did you lose these soldiers? Why did you leave that territory of defense? Who was planning for that? Who was the head of engineer service? Who was the head of artillery? Who was air defense? Logistics? Everybody come together and show us the actions and what you've done, what you have not done. When the intel gave you this information, what information were you not given? And only then the army can derive the right lessons from their mistakes and works properly. This is a procedure written to defend from idiots and from tyrants, because the commander is responsible for everything, but he should not be a tyrant. While the battle note creates space for all tyranny you want. This is the worst tool that could be used. You got a notification, a writ, a prescription, you can blame everything on the dead if something didn't work out. He was given an allowance and he failed to withdraw, right? He is such a bad brigade commander. I have a simple question to military or to those who consider themselves being military. When you lose communication with a detachment, who is responsible for that? I should be responsible in recreating that communication, or the commander should be responsible to recreate the connection with me? I could be on the other side of a company. I didn't hear the order. Who is responsible? Very simple. Always commander. Subordinate doesn't have anything to do to restore communication. It's always on the commander. And if I gave him a notice, how did that happen? He may have heard that I did not hear it. Didn't come through. I didn't hear any order coming from you. If I want to, I lead them there. If I don't want to lead you there. This is not the way the army should work. It should work as an orchestra. And this is the system that is faulty at its core. However, we've been considering all the soldiers and officers are heroes fighting on the front, and many of them are. The system itself is working faulty. There are basic things disrupted in the core of Ukraine military that make army an army. And if you don't have that, it doesn't work. That's it. I have a very simple question in this relation. If 72nd Brigade were given an allowance to leave, a permission to leave to save their troops, what moving of 123rd Brigade, a special brigade of territorial defense, to replace them, what can we talk in this regards about who can replace them? Well, exactly, you're a civilian, Nikolai, but you understand that on logical connections. That means that we allowed the 72nd to leave, and 123rd we allowed to come or not to come to that position. And then what's supposed to happen? 73rd should call 123rd and say, hey, man, what's up? Are you leaving? I don't know. I was given a permission. Let me think a little bit. I'll smoke, maybe. I'll have a drink. I'll consult my subordinates here, and we'll see according to our mood. So let me know when you'll be leaving so I can come in maybe and take your positions. Right? You expect that to happen on that level? Because rotation is one of the most difficult maneuvers on war. And what do you expect? One troop may say, I want to withdraw now, but maybe change my mind in the morning. I'm an alive person, and I only have a prescription to leave. It's not a command, so let me think about it. Is that an army? Is that how we manage our military? And then a scary question, who is in charge of rotation? When 72nd is leaving and 123rd is entering, who is carrying a personal responsibility for that? I suspect it's Mariana Bezugla, right? Exactly, that's the only samurai we have, and even that is in a skirt, who is not afraid to take responsibility for what she is doing. And I may not be in agreement with her on details, but she is the only one who is fighting without shame. So there is a leader who has the right to manage both 123rd and 72nd. And he, after the word I order, carries all responsibility, all personal responsibility for how he organized and orchestrated that rotation. And now we have what? Battalion commander in charge, are responsible for that, and soldiers who left, and brigade commander of 72nd who left at his own volition or not. So anybody but the commander, because there is no word order, there is only prescription. And of our one.